And it was this very cassette. This was my very first one. Mind blown. Forever changed. Everything changed on that day. But it wasn't until I owned my own and I played it and I heard those sounds and the music and the lyrics. Everything changed. You guys feel me on this, right? That point in which we discovered Rush, discovered Neil Peart, the man behind the kit, and the man writing these lyrics, which are bonkers, amazing for rock music. We like Rush because it is amazing music with incredible lyrics. And Neil Peart is a central core tenet of that. It is undeniable that his influence echoes forward to this very day. His spirit in what he brought to Rush, gave to all of us, has influence all the way into today and into the future on the 50-something tour, where they promise to honor him. And for all of you going to the 50-something tour, you're going to be hearing Neil's parts. You'll be hearing Neil's lyrics. Hey guys, welcome back. It has been 6 years since we lost Neil Peart. And with this new tour, Getty, Alex, Anika, Lauren, going out for the 50-something tour, we never thought we'd be here. Which I want to ask one question. Why are we here? Because Neil was here. His legacy is undeniable, his influence and how he inspired us. Guys, thank you for being here. I'm Eric. This is the Loudboy Experience, and let's go. As the years roll by, as we get older, it feels like time progresses quicker and quicker each day. The minutes roll by, the hours, the days. Now, some of these days and a lot of these hours don't feel short while we're going through them, because I'm talking about the hard times, the pain that we suffer, the struggles, the losses, right? Those feel like the longest hours. And yet, in retrospect and hindsight, with that 2020 perspective on our lives, we can look back and go, wow, where did it go? That was insane. When we were kids, the summers they felt like endless, didn't they? They seemed endless. And they lasted forever until school hit, right? And you got to trudge your way through that school year, and then you get another endless summer. I mean, it felt that way as a kid, at least for me. Time didn't roll by as quickly. Now, as time seems to be progressing each day, and we go throughout our lives and we're working, we have families and all our obligations and things that we must do in our routines and all these things that we do, we don't often get markers that tell us, oh, look at what I've done. Look at what I've achieved. Look at the success that I've had. And I had a reminder of this recently. My son Landon visited. Both my two oldest sons, live in North Carolina now with their wives. One of my sons is a teacher. He teaches technology and computers and that kind of stuff. Super proud of him. He's kind of like his dad that way. My other son is a youth minister at a church. So they're both in North Carolina in two separate cities, but Landon came to visit, and it was wonderful. It was amazing having Landon in town. We got to have so many long conversations. And it was a sense of pride and accomplishment, not in a selfish way, but when you look into the eyes of your kid and he is able to, with wisdom beyond his years, offer guidance and counseling and love, compassion, support, empathy. When your child can now give that back to you, and you've spent a good part of your life doing your best to raise him to be a good, decent person, right? To be a good person in this world. And when they can give that back to you, you realize, wow, not only have I done something well, I mean, they've achieved this on their own. His mother's a big part of it, the community in which he was raised, but it is amazing seeing your children, right? It is that mark of going, I helped do that, right? That young man, I'm so proud of him. He's making a difference in this world. He's changing lives and he's helping others. I helped to do that. It's that marker in time when you can look, wow, it was worth it. All those years, it was worth it. The same goes with art. This is what Neil Peart gave us. his accomplishments as he went throughout his lives for over 40 years, the words, the music, the rhythms, the stories. He shared so much of himself for such an introverted, private guy, a true intellectual behind the drum set, right? A thinking man's drummer. And this is what compelled me, this is what made me love Rush, is that I was a young drummer at the time. And before that, I was listening to garbage music, and then I discovered Rush. And hearing this drummer, I just wanted to aspire to that, to be that, to be even 1/10 of good. You know what I mean? You just want, when you hear greatness, you want to emulate it, you're inspired by it, and it makes you drive further in your own life. So, have you ever thought about who you would be if you had not met a certain person, if someone hadn't put a pair of drumsticks in your hand, if you hadn't heard a certain type of music, a certain band at the right age, if they hadn't put an instrument in your hands, like a saxophone or whatever it might be, the exposure to music and the people in our lives help form who we are. They mold us into who we are over time. And this is really special. I know this is obvious on its face, right? You know, what we've been through, who we've been with, what we've been exposed to, and what we like. Of course, it molds us. But let's reflect on that just for a moment. So, I'm a young drummer. It's the late 80s. And I'd grown up with music all around me. For example, my mom in her senior year was pregnant with me, her senior year of college. She's taking a music course, like a music appreciation, right? And she's always been very musical. Both of my parents have. And in music class, I'm in her belly. And when they're putting on Beethoven and Bach and whatever music it might be, and there's music in the, I was in there dancing around, bebopping to the music. And I just love that. And of course, I crossed the finish line with her later. When she graduated, I was there as well. And what's really fantastic is 20 something years later, I went to that same college and I graduated from that same school. It's kind of our family school. It's a private Christian school. And that's where we all have gone. But I love that I've graduated twice. But it's that, I mean, it starts at the earliest age. When my kids were young, my wife would put headphones on her belly, you know, big headphones like these, right? She put these on her belly and she'd play them classical music and stuff because we had heard, you know, right, that helps with development, intelligence, and boy, did it work. Our kids are ridiculously intelligent. But I, of course, knowing exposure to great music, if that was the key, I, of course, took several occasions to put some Rush on her tummy when our kids are in there, or I'd put some Dream Theater. Is I'm like, all right, they're going to get a little bit more exposure, right? If classical music is great, I'm going to give them the classical music version of rock, which is like the best progressive rock you can imagine. So I would do that. I exposed my kids to that. What's really great is my son's visiting. And two things, he told me he wants my old Zune. You guys remember, it's highly made fun of, by the way, right? But I have an 80 gigabyte Zune, and I never had an iPod, by the way. All right, so I learned, he wants it, so I'm going to give it to him, okay? And I'm going to I want to show you guys the Zune sometime just to talk about some vintage retro tech. And I want to do a video about that, right? Retro tech. I think it's just cool to look back on where we've come from. But my son also said this. He's talking to my daughter. She came over one evening while he's visiting with us, because she lives nearby at the same college that we've all gone to. She comes down, spends the evening with us, and a random conversation that I overhear, they're like in the other part of the living room, and he tells her like some of his favorite bands offhand. Like if he had to choose this or that, he lists like Rush, and he listed Dream Theater and some other bands. I'm going, what? I had no idea that Landon held the bands that I love in such high regard. That was very cool. But of course, where does that come from? Exposure. I love that my kids have been exposed to the music that I love. Okay, and so it's not just the latest pop hit on the radio, the 3-minute ditty that is like, it's like chewing gum, right? It's called pop music because I think it's like bubble gum, right? That's what I think modern music is. It's flushable, it goes away, and it has no lasting value. Most of it. I know there's good stuff out there, and I like the good stuff. So you can scream it at me all you want, but yes, but in general, most things in the pop realm are literally flushable the next day. Okay, so all right, back to Dream Theater, back to Rush. So Landon said this, he's been exposed to it. So it's the late 80s, and I'm a young drummer. I had been drumming since third or fourth grade, mostly snare, bass drum, and a lot. Some days in band, I'd have my left hand with a stick playing the snare, and I'd be playing bass drum over here with my right hand because I was the only drummer in our tiny little elementary school band. And my girlfriend at the time, quote unquote girlfriend, she's a girl that I liked a lot, Amy. She played either flute or clarinet. So it was really cool to be, the cool drummer in the back of the room playing. And what's interesting is the gentleman who first taught me percussion, taught me how to play. Poor guy had been probably in one of the wars, World War II, Korea, I'm not sure. He's missing like half of his fingers. I kid you not. And a guy missing fingers and with stubs, he had a true disability. He's missing half of his hands, was still holding the sticks and showing me how to play. So I learned, it's like Daredevil learning karate, learning his martial arts from a blind teacher, right? Well, I had a drummer who barely had fingers. Okay, I hope that didn't sound bad. What we're exposed to. So I'm playing drums, and then finally in ninth grade, out of Texas, by the way. And by the way, Texas holds a very special place. I've seen Rush there more times than ever any other place. But out of Texas comes a Texas kid. And by the way, he had the Neil Peart mullet going on, right? Long and back, kind of short up front, that Neil Peart had for a while before he went to the rat tail and the shorter hair. Neil Peart had kind of a mullet look going on. It truly was, right? In retrospect, so this kid comes up from Texas, and he had this thing going on with literally it's permed and back, short up. His name's Billy. He's from Texas, and our families knew each other. But Billy, the most ridiculous drummer that you can imagine for a high school student. And all of a sudden, two things happen. I was exposed to Rush, and I was exposed to great drumming at my age level. I'm in ninth grade, and I'm looking up to him as a mentor who's basically my age. As an older brother figure, he had his own drum set in his room at his place. And we go over there, and he's showing me for the first time, I'd never touched a set before. I'm just playing snare, and I'm playing, so I'm doing the really basic stuff on percussion, and he shows me a drum set for the first time. And he'd drive us, because we didn't have marching band, so we had concert band, jazz band, all the other types of bands. We're doing them all, and we're both in the percussion part of the band. And after that, he would drive us back to his place some days. He lived in a small town, and basically we had one central regional high school with all the small towns around it, into which they all formed and congregated. Okay, so he lived in the town north of there. I lived in the town south. So a lot of times I would go home with him and later on somehow get back to my place. And there's the drum set, but in his truck, our commute to and from school, and a couple times I got to spend the night at his house. Again, our families are friends, our parents are friends. So when my parents went out of town for certain things, I'd actually go over there and I'd spend time there. Okay, so he's got the drum set, but in his truck. All right, this is the commute part. This is what's so important. I'm looking down at the little white Nissan pickup truck. Between us in the seats, one of those old school cassette holders, right? So for example, I have 5 vintage cassettes right here, everything from Van Halen to Rush to Boston Dream Theater. Okay, these are old. So he'd have a case full of basically Rush. That's coming apart. All right, so imagine how much Rush do I have here? Oh, my show of hands is down there. I have at least 2112. All right, so but he has a cassette case, wall-to-wall Rush up until the late 80s. So okay, what we were up to at that point. Maybe Hold Your Fire. I think Show of Hands, and now there's more on that in a second, but all the way back from 2112 and, Farewell to Kings and all that great stuff, it's in there. And I had no idea who Rush was. Not a clue. Not a clue. My world view of music was pop, top 40, And imagine that. You want to be a great drummer and that's all you know? And it's not like I listened to a lot of Beatles or anything like that. And my parents didn't give me that exposure. So what's so revolutionary and important about this one point in time is that a case full of Rush sat beside me, curiosity sparked. And then he starts playing me Rush. And of course, Rush was always playing in the tape deck of his truck. So I made the tie, like, oh, this box full of tapes of Rush, that's what I'm hearing on his stereo in the truck. So you go, okay, that's who this is. And holy crap, what is this music? Who is that drummer? And what are these words? What are these lyrics I'm hearing? Everything changed. Everything changed. And it was this very cassette. This was my very first one that I think I ordered from one of those cassette tape club things, right? That's just what I had at the time. Again, different world. No internet. I couldn't exactly in my small town go down to the mall and buy something. So in those days, we did mail order, didn't we? Right? We got sucked into one of those tape clubs. I get 2112. I pop in them. I think my dad had a Sanyo, one of those big tower speakers. They're a cheap piece of crap, but turntable up top, dual cassette, tuner. You know how it works, right? One of those big box deals. And I pop this in. Mind blown. Forever changed. Everything changed on that day. Billy exposed me to Rush. I learned what they were, but it wasn't until I owned my own and I played it and I heard those sounds and then the music and the lyrics. Everything changed. You guys feel me on this, right? That point in which we discovered Rush, discovered Neil Peart, the man behind the kit, and the man writing these lyrics, which are bonkers, amazing for rock music. And of course, the inspiration kept going outside of the band's music, outside of Rush lyrics. It went on to wanting to read what Neil was reading. You look in the liner notes and you start getting more and more exposure. You go, oh, he's influenced by Ayn Rand. And specifically, mostly, this book, Anthem. So what do I do as a young kid who doesn't give a crap about reading? I mean, come on. Which one of us really did in those days? I go out and I get Anthem. This is my second copy. I have an original copy that I read back then. And I get Anthem. And I start realizing some bigger ideas and themes about life. About totalitarian governments. About oppression, about freedom, about individuality, and about all these things, right? The story of Anthem, the story of 2112. And it helped mold me even more into realizing my value as an individual, my distrust and true dislike of any government or body or someone who's trying to control my life, take away my liberties, take away my freedoms. No. And of course, that perfectly aligned with who I was, what my parents had taught my worldview was really just being formed in those days, was far from being completed. But this helped. The fact that Neil took on such challenging ideas, was influenced by a great thinker, and boy, am I sick of people accusing Rush, which is stupid, and Ayn Rand by extension, and vice versa, that this is about fascism. This is the opposite of fascism. Fascism is centralized control by a dictatorship which strips all your freedoms, aligns itself closely with business, controlling the means of everything. That is fascism, which is the world of Anthem, which is the world of 2112. We taking care of everything, the words you hear, the songs you sing, the images that give pleasure to your eyes, right? They control the entire construct of the 2112 world. No wonder he was looking for a way out. No wonder he was looking for hope. And then the oracle happened and he had the dream and he realized and he ends up, but you know the story. And this is so important because in this book, he has no identity. Okay. He doesn't even know the word I am Eric. You are this. But those pronouns did not exist in this world. They've been stripped of that much liberty, that much identity, and that much of their freedoms was stripped from them in a totalitarian, meaning a totally totalitarian way. That's what Anthem is about. And in the end of this book, the main character, discovers the word I. I, meaning myself, I have value. I can have my own ideas. I can just express the sentence, I like this or I like that, not the we. Because before that, in the world of Anthem, and you could argue 2112, even though it doesn't use those specific, he didn't go that directly with it, but in the world of Anthem, everything is considered we. They are at such this thing where it's all so united, so crushed down by a controlling government to where that, meaning like we own this tape and we own this tape. I'm talking about myself, right? But really it is complete collectivism, where the collective peoples or body of people is the only identity you have. You have no individual value, which goes against every instinct that we have as human beings. We crave freedom. We crave liberty. In the United States, our Constitution recognizes those freedoms we've been given and puts them into law. That's what's so beautiful about our Constitution, is that we recognize our God-given freedoms, our God-given liberties, and then we solidify those by law, and then we own those. I have liberty. I have freedom to make my own decisions, to chart my own path. We like Rush because it is amazing music with incredible lyrics. And Neil Peart is a central core tenet of that. And so looking back on his influence, how he inspired us, it's hard to put into words. So what I wanted to do is kind of just talk about my story, how I was influenced, because I know a lot of you share this. You remember the day, don't you, that you discovered great bands like Rush. Okay, it doesn't have to be just Rush, but you remember the day. You probably remember what you liked before that, don't you? Okay, you remember that turning point in your life, in that point in which you went down a new path and you found something better and you were changed because of it. A lot of you maybe wanted to become a better drummer. I learned on my own through reading, a lot of inspiration from Neil and other sources. I love to write. I've written a novel. I've written a screenplay. I love to write. That never existed before. And a lot of it was the inspiration that Neil gave me. It is undeniable that his influence echoes forward to this very day. His spirit in what he brought to Rush, gave to all of us, has influence all the way into today and into the future on the 50 something tour where they promise to honor him. Okay. Anika, God bless her, man. Learning 38 to 40 songs, ridiculous, right? But even then, what is she learning? She's learning the parts that Neil wrote. She's learning the drum parts and the percussion that go into each individual Rush song. That's Neil. And I just love it. So Getty will be singing Neil's words. Anika will be playing Neil's drum parts. So he is alive and well in our minds, in our memories. And it just keeps paying forward and paying forward. And we're just truly blessed, man, to have a mind like that, to have such skill, to have someone who was such an individual. And what I mean by that is he was very he was a very private guy. And yet, through his books, through his lyrics, we learned more about him than we learn about a lot of people, don't we? So really, he gave a lot to us for a private gentleman who really would like to keep his entire life right. He gave us so much through his art. And this is what art does. Art is a beautiful thing. Art is an expression of our souls. Art is an expression of our spirit, our minds, our hearts, who we are. And when it's done at our very best, art is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And that's what Neil gave us. He gave us art that will resonate for many years to come. So guys, do you remember when you first heard Neil's lyrics when you first heard this drumming? I remember a band practice where I had a show of hands with me, and at that time I was already playing saxophone. So we walk up and to one of the drummers that was a good friend of ours, and my friends wanted him to hear what I was listening to, which was the rhythm method. By the way, Billy could play the rhythm method. So when I talked about how Billy was a mentor and someone that I aspired to be as great as or in my general age range, it's because at one of our jazz band concerts, Billy took his drum solo and played like most of the rhythm method, okay? That late 80s Neil Peart solo, he could play it. Bonkers. So that Neil Peart solo, I'm playing fast forward another several years into high school. I'm on Cape Cod, and I'm playing it for a drummer friend of ours. He's blown away. He's like, that's one guy. That's one guy. So, because of course he's part of a bigger drum corps, right? And so it was bonkers to him that this was just one guy playing, and that's what Neil was, man. So, man, we're so blessed to have had him in our lives, and guess what? He remains so. And for all of you going to the 50 something tour, you're going to be hearing Neil's parts. You'll be hearing Neil's lyrics. They'll be honoring him, and that's just a wonderful thing. And it's great to know that his family came around and signed off on this. So, guys, I have a lot more planned. I have several stories and articles that we'll be talking about in future videos. But, guys, thank you so much. Let me know about your experience, how Neil influenced you beyond the music, beyond the drums, words, ideas, lyrics, and otherwise. I'd love to know how Neil. So share that with us here. Guys, I'm Eric. This is a Loudboy experience. Thank you so much for being here. You guys have a good one.